All right, today we are jumping into a really fascinating biblical mystery, a theory that ties the very first page of the Bible to its very last. So let's dive right in.
What is the connection between the beginning and the end? And look, that isn't just some philosophical question. It's actually the heart of a pretty incredible literary theory from a scholar named Craig H. Robinson. His whole argument is that if we really want to get a handle on the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation, well, we might have been looking in completely the wrong place. The secret, he says, it's been hiding in plain sight this whole time, all the way back in the creation story in Genesis.
So think of this less like a Bible study and more like we're cracking open a biblical cold case, searching for a clue that's been buried for centuries inside the creation story.
Okay, but before we dive into the new evidence, we have to talk about the usual suspect. You know, the connection pretty much everyone knows. I mean, if you spend any time at all with these texts, the second you hear Revelation 7 trumpets, your mind probably goes to one place. And that's the 10 plagues of Egypt.
And hey, for good reason, right? Scholars have been pointing this out for literally centuries. The parallels are they're really hard to miss. You've got water turning to blood, you've got a plague of darkness, and of course, you've got swarms of locusts showing up in both stories.
And it gets even more specific when you dig in. It's almost like Revelation takes the Exodus plagues and just cranks the volume to 11. So hail becomes hail mixed with fire. The plague on the Nile River, now it's the sea and the rivers. And those locusts? Yeah, they get what you can only describe as a demonic upgrade. These connections are solid. They're totally well established.
But here's where the research throws a massive curveball. It forces us to ask this really compelling question. What if our intense focus on Exodus has actually created a huge blind spot? What if we've been so focused on the obvious connection that we've missed an even deeper, more profound pattern, one that's been hiding in plain sight the entire time?
And you can actually see this blind spot in the data. There was this one scholar, John Paulian, who did a survey of 10 major commentaries. And what he found was, well, it was kind of wild. He found 33 different instances where scholars connected the trumpets back to the Exodus plagues. Okay, makes sense. But in those same exact books, he only found just three mentions of a link to the Genesis creation story. That's not just a small difference, that's a massive gap.
And get this isn't even a brand new idea. A theologian named Jacques Ellul pointed this out way back in 1977. He said that these connections have been, and I'm quoting him here, rarely seen. So what we're doing here isn't chasing some shiny new theory. It's more like we're dusting off a forgotten cold case file, looking at a clue that has been sitting there, waiting for decades.
So, okay, let's do it. Let's start following these breadcrumbs. What are the clues? What are these Genesis fingerprints that could possibly tie Revelation's judgments all the way back to the very first chapter of the Bible?
Well, the first piece of evidence is basically a cosmic hit list. Think about it. In Genesis, God creates these core realms: earth, sea, heaven, and the sun and moon that mark day and night. Now look at the first 4 trumpets in Revelation. They target those exact same realms, one by one. It's a perfect systematic matchup. And the evidence gets super specific, like down to a single literary fingerprint. The Greek phrase for green grass, kortos kleros, it only shows up 2 times in the entire Greek version of the Old and New Testaments. Just 2. The first time, in Genesis, when it's being created, and the second time, you guessed it, in Revelation, when it's being destroyed. I mean, come on, that's not a coincidence. That is a deliberate, almost screamingly obvious link. And this connection goes way beyond just a few shared words. It's about these deep thematic opposites, complete inversions of Genesis. So Genesis says God creates animals according to their kind. Revelation, it mashes them up into these bizarre, grotesque composite creatures. Genesis gives humans dominion over the creatures. Revelation, it has these demonic locusts tormenting humans. The command to be fruitful and multiply is flipped on its head, and 1/3 of all life dies. It's exactly like looking at the story of creation, but through a shattered mirror. Okay, now this next part, this is where the theory gets really elegant. I mean, truly beautiful in its structure. Because what we're seeing isn't just random chaos and destruction. No way. It's a perfectly ordered process. It's a decreation, if you will. So first, let's do a quick refresher on the order of creation from Genesis.
Day 1, light and darkness. Day 2, heaven and the sea are separated. Day 3, dry land and vegetation appear. Okay? Got that sequence? Just hold that in your head for a second.
All right, now let's look at the order of judgment from the first 4 trumpets. Trumpet 1 strikes the earth and its vegetation. Trumpet 2 hits the sea. Trumpet 3 affects the heavens, and Trumpet 4 darkens the sun and moon, the markers of day and night. Now keep that sequence in mind, and let's put it up against the creation order we just talked about.
So you've got the creation sequence, and you've got the judgment sequence. Have you seen it yet?
Okay, here it is, the big reveal. When you put these 2 sequences right next to each other, the pattern is it's stunning. The trumpet judgments are undoing creation in the exact reverse order that it was made. Day 3's work on the earth, that's undone first by trumpet 1. Then day 2's work on the sea and heavens, undone by trumpets 2 and 3. And finally, day 1's work with light and darkness, undone by trumpet 4. It is a perfect, absolutely mind-blowing literary reversal. But wait, it gets even more intricate. The argument goes that what the trumpets don't destroy is just as significant as what they do. So, the trumpets specifically leave birds and land animals untouched. The very creatures that were wiped out in the Genesis flood story. And while a third of the ships are destroyed in Revelation, back in Genesis, the most important ship of all, the Ark, is saved. It's like the trumpets are also an inverse echo of the story of Noah.
Okay, so that is one heck of a literary puzzle, right? But it all leads to the big question. So what? Why does any of this pattern matching matter? How does seeing this actually change how we're supposed to read what is, let's be honest, a famously difficult book?
Well, seeing this pattern is like finding a key that unlocks a whole bunch of things. For one, it helps explain stuff in the text that otherwise seems contradictory. It totally reframes the bizarre imagery, like those locusts with human faces. Suddenly, maybe it's not a literal monster we're supposed to picture, but a powerful symbol for the complete breakdown of created order. And maybe the biggest takeaway of all is that it suggests these first 4 trumpets aren't 4 separate events happening one after another. Maybe they're 4 different camera angles, all pointed at the same, single cosmic event. The terrifying, systematic undoing of creation. So ultimately, this perspective changes the whole game. The question shifts from what is going to happen to a much more literary one. How is this story being told?
And that leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. What if the end of the Bible isn't meant to be a simple roadmap to the future? What if instead it's a breathtakingly complex literary mirror, one that reflects and reverses its own beginning, all to tell a story that's far deeper and far more artistically intricate than we ever imagined?